I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world, one based on mutual interest and mutual respect.
In his forceful but nuanced speech at Cairo University, President Obama called for alliances with Muslims, but also pledged to confront violent extremism.
In Ankara, I made clear that America is not and never will be at war with Islam. We will, however, relentlessly confront violent extremists who pose a grave threat to our security.
Jeff Zeleny, White House reporter for the New York Times, is traveling with the president and explains what the White House had hoped to accomplish.
President Obama called for a new beginning today in relations with the United States and the Muslim world. In doing so, he opened up one of the biggest gambits of his young presidency. When President Obama walked into the hall in Cairo University today,
thank you. Shukran.
The audience applauded and greeted his words with deep respect. But more important in the eyes of the White House was how this was being received in the wider Muslim world. What President Obama was trying to do today was use his personal connection, his deep biography, to connect with Muslims and signify a sharp break from President Bush. Notably, he did not use President George W. Bush's name one time, but he said the United States will use different ideals. They will not use the same policies that George W. Bush did after the Iraq War.
I also believe that events in Iraq have reminded America of the need to use diplomacy and build international consensus to resolve our problems whenever possible.
All in all, this speech, highly anticipated, high expectations. It's far too early to say if this will be worth the risk that Mr. Obama made coming here.
But what was the reaction to the president's speech across the Middle East, and especially on the streets of Cairo? Michael Slackman, Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times, spoke with some local Egyptians to get their views.
I spent the time of the speech with about 20 men in a coffee house in a poor neighborhood called Bulak. The mood in the coffee house was almost giddy because the men there said they were accustomed to being demonized by the president and by Westerners. So to have Barack Obama in their city, they felt was an extraordinary outreach. They were thrilled that the president spoke eloquently about Islam and actually quoted from the Quran.
The enduring faith of over 1 billion people is so much bigger than the narrow hatred of a few. Islam is not part of the problem in combating violent extremism. It is an important part of promoting peace.
They were disappointed and in some cases turned off by his attempt to create balance between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But if we see this conflict only from one side or the other, then we will be blind to the truth. The only resolution is for the aspirations of both sides to be met through two states where Israelis and Palestinians each live in peace and security.
What I liked was that his speech referred to the establishment of a Palestinian state. He's the first American president to talk honestly and at the same time clearly. He left a good impression among the Arab nation.
Finally, when the speech was over, the big question hanging over everything was, now what? His remarks were well received, but they want to see implementation.
I think that words should be implemented and not left merely as speech.
No single speech can eradicate years of mistrust, but I am convinced that in order to move forward, there must be a sustained effort to listen to each other, to learn from each other, to respect one another, and to seek common ground. As the Holy Quran tells us, be conscious of God and speak always the truth.